All right, here we go. Dr. Stephen Greer, welcome back. Famed researcher and retired emergency medical doctor who now heads a disclosure project and focuses on ending the secrecy around UFOs and UAPs. Welcome back to Vlad TV.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
This is actually the first time we're face-to-face.
I know. It's great. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time.
Oh, yeah. No, last time we did it remotely, but I had to get in the same room with you.
Yes, here we are. I'm glad you could come too.
Well, a lot has happened since last time.
Oh, boy.
So Trump created a new task force that's focused on declassifying federal secrets, including UFOs. Mm-hmm. And Representative Anna Luna is heading up this task force.
Right.
Have they released anything so far?
No, and I'm not sure that Trump created that. That's been organized under the House Oversight Committee. Now, President Trump is wanting to declassify a number of documents and information, and everything is still under review from the White House point of view. The House Oversight Committee, because I personally have met with Ms. Luna and Burchett and had conversations with Representative Moskowitz and others. They have a task force that has a number of objectives. It's not only UAPs, other issues. I think the big problem I've seen in dealing with them for the last 2 or 3 years or so is that there's not a select committee with subpoena power, which they have to get. They've been blocked by some of the bad actors in the Congress. And number 2, they don't have the funding for a specialized staff. So you need a staff of people who can become expert in this area. And if not, you're not going to be able to know anything. So my experience there is that we'll go in with briefing materials that's dispositive evidence and proof and firsthand witnesses. Other people who are professional military and intelligence disinformation operatives go in and then gaslight them in another direction. So for the most part, these people in Congress mean well, but they don't know where the washroom is. They don't even know where the landscape is put out. So, and I don't see that changing. I know 3 years ago when I was brought into the Senate Intelligence Committee SCIF, the Secure Compartmented Information Facility where you do exchange sensitive and top secret information, those guys who are at the top of Senate Intelligence and Armed Services investigating this hadn't not gotten anywhere. But the lead guy was told, you can spend 10 or 20% of your time on this. But his portfolio was oversight of CIA, NSA, National Reconnaissance Office that runs all the secret spy satellites. I mean, come on. You need a staff, 20, 30 people who drill down on all the evidence and get to the bottom of it. So it's not muscled up to the extent it has to be. So what I say is that they have 2 pathways here. They either get it done right, or at least they open up their inquiry to first-hand whistleblowers like Mr. Barber, and not bring in people who are second, third, and fourth hand, don't know anything, right? So the hearing they had a few months ago in the House, there was no one there who knew anything about the subject. They were all second-hand, third-hand, speculative, people who had been with NASA but didn't know anything. I knew a number of them. And I'm going, why are these people testifying? You want someone who's actually handled the craft, handled the bodies, been operational on a retrieval team, or even like Mr. Herrera, who came across this thing and almost lost his life by these thugs who said, look, we're going to mention this, you're dead. So now those are the people who need to be sworn in under oath. Now, the reason I say we have to have subpoena power is that if it's in the Congress, they can't force someone to come in, right, without a subpoena. They can invite people. But the really high value targets that I have on my list, they got to be subpoenaed. And then if they lie under oath to Congress, they got a problem. Now, the other pathway, which I think is more viable, would require executive orders from the president. And that would be under the executive branch and law enforcement. And law enforcement can compel without a subpoena. If you're brought in by a federal agent and asked about something and you lie, it's a felony, point blank. So the more efficient way to do this, in my opinion, would be the House and the Senate to investigate this, refer it to DOJ because it's criminal activity. We can prove that. And then DOJ assigns to whatever divisions people to go out and do a proper investigation and pull people in and interrogate them, and if necessary, get warrants, no-knock warrants to move into corporate locations and secret facilities that I have locations for, and they retrieve the evidence and proof. So that is something that could happen tonight if we could get executive orders from the president to do it. So that's what we're recommending. There are 5 executive orders we've given to them, and we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
Well, Kash Patel, the new FBI director, he's been vocal about exposing UFO secrets and so forth. What's your take on this?
Yes, he has, but he's been gaslit by Lou Elizondo and other people that are professional disinformation operatives. So here's where you get into a big problem. When you have people who are very well trained to tell part information and part misinformation or disinformation, and you're not someone who's an expert in the area, it's so easy to gaslight them in the wrong way. For example, consistently, the nexus of folks doing that, Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and people like Jim Semivan and others, they'll say, well, they're a threat. We're trying to imply the aliens are some kind of threat. Well, they want people to believe that because they can get more money for the military-industrial complex. It's a hoax. But the other thing they'll say is, we don't have anything that flies like that. Oh, really? Yeah, we do. And we have had since the 50s. Literally since the 50s. So then you ask the question, if you put some real information, this is why I call it the poison pill. So on the outside of this poison pill of disinformation is the sweet truth of some facts and evidence. But inside the messaging, the narrative, is a total disinformation narrative designed to move them off the path of finding what the real truth is. Now, I will tell you, the bigger secret here is not about extraterrestrials. It's about the fact that there's a covert, illegal operation, unconstitutional, that have technologies that can, as I'm quoting Admiral Wilson, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff that I briefed, can do circles around our B-2 stealth bomber, circles around it. So, and those are human. So that is a threat to the U.S. Constitution because of how they're operating, but it's also a strategic threat. And those assets are operating all over the world. We know they're in China, they're in Russia, they're in the Middle East. One was downed in Iran that we had to retrieve. We'll have this from a Green Beret source who's read into that operation. So, what I tell people is that that's the part of this they don't want the president and Congress and the American people to know, because that is the linchpin in being able to hoax an alien invasion or hoax an alien threat, right? And that is the 70-year plan. We're getting to the very end, a crescendo of a plan that was concocted by a bunch of psychopaths and sociopaths in 1953-54 to eventually, as Werner von Braun, who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler, said, create an alien threat to unite the world around sort of a dystopic, totalitarian, militaristic situation. And we're right there. Glad we are right at that happening. And so what really worries me and keeps me up at night, I'll be very blunt, is that I don't see yet the bandwidth in Congress or in the White House yet to comprehend the vastness of this problem and how to discern the information from the disinformation. And in order to do that, they're going to have to pull in people like Mr. Barber and Don Paul, and these people, I know them, who have handled both ends of this. They've handled the man-made, and they've handled the ones that are, non-human. And so that has to be unpacked. Instead, they're listening to people and saying, oh, well, don't look behind this curtain, right? So I liken this organization keeping the secret to the Wizard of Oz. And it's this old crudmudgeon back there pulling levers, scaring the hell out of Dorothy and scaring the scarecrow and all that. And they're very good at what they're doing. And because there's not a professional staffing right now looking at this, either in the White House or Congress, they're susceptible to that. And it's I've said to people very high up in Congress and the administration, a little knowledge on this is a very dangerous thing, extremely dangerous. You don't want dilettantes in there.
I mean, this whole concept of creating a fake alien invasion to take control of the world,
It's already happened.
It's been floating around. There's something called Project Bluebeam.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And more recently, I remember there was a comic book I read that later on became a movie and a series called The Watchmen, where essentially the premise of the comic book was that, in an alternate, reality, America and Russia are about to launch nuclear missiles at each other. And one of these guys, Ozymandias, basically drops a fake alien in the middle of Times Square that kills thousands of people. And suddenly everyone unites and America and Russia are best friends.
Well, the best thing for that was Independence Day, the movie.
Right, that as well. Right.
That's the one that was really the hallmark. And that was right out of CIA PSYOP, psychological warfare scripting, because it was like the whole world united around fighting the alien threat. Now, obviously, it's a sexy movie line. It works in Hollywood here. You can be as dumb as you want to be and make a $2 billion movie, right? But don't quote me on that. Let me take that out. But true. But it's like that comic Ken Worthy or whatever. I can't fix stupid. But but we have a situation where that narrative has already happened. Here's the litmus test for this. When I was first starting to do this in my spare time as an emergency doctor, it came out that I was involved with, I think because I'd been on Larry King Live back in '94 or something like that. And my youngest daughter's school teacher wanted me to give a talk, and these are first graders in North Carolina, in Asheville, North Carolina. And they wanted to have me come in and present on this. Now, you have to remember, my daughter was 6 years old. She's 36 now, so it's 30 years ago. And the first question out of the mouth of a babe was, yeah, but Dr. Greer, aren't you afraid that if you go out, you'll be abducted by the aliens? Now, this is a first grader in North Carolina 30 years ago. And at that point, I went, boom, PSYOPs have reached saturation. That between movies and entertainment and the ufology mythology, everyone thinks that's going on when it's a CIA PSYOP, right? Now, I knew that in the early 90s. I didn't know it until probably 92, 93. And then I had men who were operational, who had been on man-made UFOs using strange robotic grays and other creatures to abduct people for the psychological warfare value, but also to cover up some real events. So sometimes there would be an actual ET event or an experimental aircraft of ours that looked like a UFO, and people would have seen it, and what they would do is create this fake alien abduction. Same thing with the cattle mutilations. That's what those are. Mm-hmm. And we've known this for a long time. Now, that's not the conventional wisdom. It's certainly not what someone like Lou Elizondo and those folks would go in and say. They say, oh, no, that's what the aliens are doing. And they know damn good and well it's all a PSYOP.
I think the biggest news in this world was the Jake Barber interview.
Oh, yes. I've been working with Mr. Barber for a couple of years and knew about his operations. Very little of what he did and knows has come out yet. Very, very little. But that's for reasons we can get into.
Okay, so Jake Barber is an Air Force vet, and a lot of the focus on the story was this egg-shaped craft that he actually came in contact with. Mm-hmm. This is not someone that was investigating things and so forth. This was actually a first-person encounter with some sort of craft.
No, he was on the retrieval teams officially.
Okay.
Out of Delta Force. And that team, I'll let him say where they operate from. I've been there. They are a team that are contracted to participate in operations to down and retrieve extraterrestrial vehicles or NHI craft. So that is what he and his team did. He was in charge of security and transport for those special operations. out at a couple of black sites out in the desert. And I've been to these sites. And so I can speak to more detail about that. But that is actually what he did. It was not an incidental encounter. He was operational for about 20 years at a couple of these sites where that's going on. And I've known of those sites since the early 90s, since before he arrived. And so his operations go back quite some time there. So he became fairly senior over the years, and he went from being in the military to then working, being set up in a corporate entity that contracted and would sort of work with government and aerospace companies to acquire those craft and then get them downed and then retrieve them so they could be handed over to be studied or reverse engineered. So it's a very long and complex story, only part of which is going to come out immediately. We plan the rest of this year. Next year it'll all come out.
So this particular egg spaceship, I guess, is this extraterrestrial?
Yes.
Or is it reverse engineered?
No, that one was ET origin. So, interestingly, he and I talk about this at some length. Right now, unless you're very expert in this area, you're not going to be able to distinguish between a non-human one and a reverse engineered one from Lockheed or Northrop, unless you know what to look for. And even then, the science of studying those technologies and aircraft from other places, that has been going on for 80 years, literally 80 years. So 45 to now. So there's been this, it started out like this, very slow, and then it boom, broke out back around the mid to late 50s forward. There was a huge breakout in how those technologies operate. And people are shocked when I tell them, I have an intel source who is the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs in Washington. It's the largest Department of Defense lab. He was in the vault, as it's called, where a lot of classified things are kept on this subject. And he saw that it was October 1954 that we mastered gravity control. So now imagine you've mastered gravity control. We were fooling around with it prior to, but you mastered it by then. Now, 54 to now is 70 years. So imagine a 70-year technology curve with the brightest minds, scientific minds in the world, recruited high school, college, into those programs, and virtually unlimited black budget funding, right? Trillions of dollars. So what is being flown out there would deceive the president, Senate Intelligence Committee, and this is the problem. So he and I have talked about this. So Jake Barber and I have had these long discussions where even for expert people like his team, often it's very hard to distinguish between one and the other. But this particular object is an egg-shaped object. Those have been reported for a very long time. Now, do we have knockoffs that look similar? Yes. So any shape that you would see that was non-human, we've sort of done a copycat. And that's for false flag operations. So, the public won't know, is it real? It's like the old, years ago when there used to be audio tape. Is it real or is it Memorex? Remember that commercial?
Yeah.
Is it real or is it Memorex? Is it an original that's non-human, extraterrestrial, or is it something that has been a facsimile that's been reproduced and which pretty much fool anyone who's not quite expert in the area? And I think in the last 30 years since I've been doing this, the refinement of that technology at almost where, if you look at Michael Herrera's testimony, the Marine who encountered one of these man-made ones in Indonesia, it was so advanced, but then you could tell if you got close to it, it had seams and parts. It was man-made. It's a Lockheed platform. Ones that you see that are triangular, there are ones that are extraterrestrial that are triangular. Most of the ones people see are my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, or the Raytheon platforms that are triangular. Typically, the Raytheon ones are a little less equilateral. They're a little more elongated. And those, if you look at Stephen Dignan's testimony, it's up on our site, and we actually have it in our new book that just came out. I'm going to show you in a minute. That was at a level where it was almost had a living component. So when we went up and touched it, it kind of purred, reacted. If you look at his testimony, he was out here in California at Fort Irwin in 2000. And that was a Raytheon device. And I would say out of 1 million people, all 1 million people would think that was extraterrestrial. And it wasn't. He and his wife were abducted into it and tortured. But, this is the other part of this whole story that no one gets. I mean, the ufology, it's all the abductions and mutilations. I say, yeah, I've debriefed about 24 guys who've been operational in those programs doing that. So, I'm sorry if you're gullible, but wake the fuck up. Excuse my language. But they ain't happening by the ETs. So most of the information on this is actually part information spun in with disinformation. And this is one of the real problems. And the reason I think it's important to bring this up is that when you're on these retrieval teams, like Jake was on, some of them are at a high enough level they're only retrieving, weird things. Like if you're on a retrieval team and you have a B-2 stealth go down, okay, that is one level of clearance. But it's another world when you start retrieving the man-made UFOs and the ET things. And so you get cleared slowly into that level. And I have a number of folks that we're working with who had that same trajectory. They started out very young, retrieving, a crashed jet, Air Force jet or something that had classified components on it. They all do, sensors and things like that. Be sure they don't fall into enemy hands. But then certain people then get cleared into this other level of exotics, or what's euphemistically called AT, advanced technologies, but super advanced exotic technologies.
Well, Jake Barber said that he could actually summon this egg ship with his mind.
Yeah, it's not quite that simple. It's, as you know, in 1990, I started the whole CE5 contact initiative, using consciousness interfacing with extraterrestrial sensors. So what people don't realize, and they don't think about it, is that you're not going to be able to communicate with a radio frequency like your phone across the vastness of space, because it's at the speed of light, which is the speed of a radio frequency, to communicate to the Andromeda galaxy, which is 2.5 million light years from here. It'd take you 2.5 million years to get that signal there, and another 2.5 million years for the person to answer your call.
Right.
Not going to happen. So when you're dealing with, this is where you get into strange stuff, right? And the CIA people call it WSFM, stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. That's literally what they call it. And my uncle's old company, I met an engineer, worked on this weird stuff, and he said, we just call it PFM, pure fucking magic. Excuse my language, but I mean, that's what they call it. And they're really high-end engineers in aerospace. So those technologies are the heart of one of the central things of the secrecy. Because I accidentally stumbled across that when I was 18, when I had a contact experience, and realized that those communication systems and those civilizations are interfacing with not just random thought and consciousness, but in a state of more expanded awareness and coherent thought, like a laser, like your thoughts are boom. They pick up on that at the speed of thought, which is instantaneous, because the conscious field is actually omnipresent. It's the ultimate quantum entangled field, meaning that every point in space and time is integrated into it, and there's no latency in time. Instant.
So you're saying thought is faster than light?
Oh, yeah. It's instantaneous.
Got it.
And what is a quanta of thought? Can that be quantified? Yes, it has been, and it is. So the covert programs mirrored what we were doing for peaceful contact into a program they call P3, psionic operators, where they would find people and put them through a program training them so that they could become basically biological machines. And it was brutal. Most of them died, ended up in comas. But the ones that survived became adept at being able to do that, but for a hostile reason. They weren't doing it. The CE5 contact, anyone can do it. You can get the app CE5 contact. The app is on all the stores. you can learn to do this, and it's for making peaceful contact. The aerospace industry and intelligence community said, wow, let's take this and turn it into a weapon system. So what they did was train people to do that with pretty good reliability, lock on to an extraterrestrial, say, guidance system, kind of slip in there, move it into range and hit it with an electromagnetic pulse weapon, knock it out of the sky. Opposite of what our purpose is. My purpose is to make peaceful contact and stop all that fighting. But the intelligence community, realized this a long time ago. I understand in the 50s, they realized that the technologies related to extraterrestrial craft and occupants were very much tied into that field of consciousness. So one of the problems that we're having with science right now is that everyone's sort of stuck in the flat earth society, because no one's caught up to the 50s yet, classified technologies. And so when he brought this out, people went, gosh, well, that's what Dr. Greer had been saying for 35 years. And but I knew it was operational. I mean, remember, there are a lot of people on my team who are they're former CIA remote view folks. And there was a 30-year program where the CIA used people like Ingo Swann, who's passed away, a great guy, who would use consciousness to spy on the Soviet Union or image something out in space. And they were actually incredibly accurate. So I think that's one of the things when you go from an understanding of the science of consciousness into applied physics, let's call it, with communication, but also targeting these objects. That's the really spooky end of it. That's very upsetting when people unpack the fact that it's not science fiction and it's real.
Well, one of the things that Jake mentioned is that he was actually able to control this ship with his mind using psionics. And he talked about how it differed based on the situation. Like there's a whole fight or flight aspect to how well he could control it. Do you understand that part? And can you explain it?
Well, what he was referring to, I don't think it was referring to him being the operator, but the ones that are P3 operators. So let's get clear on that, number one. And that the P3 operators are put into a training program. It's rather brutal, but it does involve drugs, dopamine, electromagnetic systems. A great many of them end up in a coma or end up dying. It's very brutal. But one of the stimulants that heightens your awareness is in a moment, if they can induce a heightened state, situational awareness, like the whole fight or flight dynamic. Now, certainly in a meditative state, you don't need that to get to a higher state. But remember, this is the mindset of a military program. Boom, get it done, right? So it's hardly the integrative program of a meditative training like I teach. But it's like, get her done by any means. And so if some people get killed being experimental guinea pigs in this, too bad, it's collateral damage. So he's talking about how when you're in a moment where you're in a fight or flight situation, all your senses and your consciousness gets very focused, right? So it's an augmentation process that can be induced. And of course, I don't recommend it. It's a terrible thing to do to fellow human beings, in my opinion. But that is why. So there are many pathways to getting into that ability, and there are ones, some of which are very positive and a great experience for everyone, and some of which are brutal, which you would expect a hardcore military program run by sociopaths that just want to get something done, right? And hey, if there's collateral damage and people get killed or injured or commit suicide or whatever, who cares, right? It's sort of like when the head of the Army intelligence guy, General Stubblebine, took his boys through some training programs for consciousness and being a remote view. And a huge percentage of them committed suicide and started doing drugs and became alcoholics and had mental breakdowns because they weren't doing it in an integrated way where they were unfolding naturally within. It was a very technologically oriented, brutal, get-it-done way. So you can get that result, right? I mean, if the goal is by any means necessary, get this done, right? You can do it, but look at the human cost. So I tell people this is not wise, nor is it humane, but that is an accurate description, what he said, of what they were doing. I have more information on those programs, and we have other people who've been operators in them. It's even the way they recruit and bring the people in. This is the part where, the whistleblower, Michael Herrera, who saw that operation in Indonesia, is this huge 300-foot diameter octagonal craft. And underneath it was a platform, and there were crates. And he initially, when we last did our interview, I just was getting ready to do the National Press Club event about a year and a half ago. And Michael Herrera didn't know that in those crates were humans being moved around. He thought it was drugs or something, but there were little portable oxygen and HVAC units on it. And so those people were people who were going to either die or starve to death after that tsunami in Indonesia in 2009. And they said, hey, they went up, these special operations guys went up and said, look, you can either stay here and die, or you can come with us. And you'll live for now. And then they would move them into these operations and screen them to be P3 operators. And the P3 operators, psionic operators, most of those people didn't pass the testing, but the ones who did then went into this more brutal program. The ones who didn't would work in STIFs, subterranean facilities or underground bases, cooking and cleaning and doing other things. So it's a rather disturbing, operation from start to finish. Although once they're there in custody, let's say, they're apparently treated quite well. But of course, it's like an indentured servitude in my mind. I mean, people can put whatever lipstick on that pig. To me, it's trafficking in desperate people and then using them for your own devices.
Well, you mentioned Luis Elizondo a few times. So there was a second congressional meeting that happened in, I think, November of 2024. And Luis Elizondo was one of the 4 experts that spoke on this. What exactly is your issue with Luis?
I don't know him, and I have no animus towards him personally at all. I just know that the top CIA guy in the last 40 years, who advises us, who's very clandestine, immediately when he surfaced said, this is the master of disinformation, and these are the things he's going to be saying that are false. So what I tell people, I don't have a problem with anybody, but I have a problem with someone deliberately providing false information to novices, people who are just trying to investigate this with the best of intentions, like Ms. Luna and others, and they are being gaslit and deceived. That's my problem. But my bigger problem is that what is the agenda of that deception? The agenda of the deception is to get people on the side of an alien threat to supports the same cabal that's been keeping the secret, right? And at the same time, present something that would be much more terrifying than 9/11 or COVID and try to seize control of people's freedoms under this, sort of ruse of a threat from outer space. So long before I got on the stage doing this, I think that had already been baked into the cake because they started abducting people and doing cattle mutilations in the late 50s and 60s. The first mutilated animal was a horse named Snippy. And the doctor who was called in on that, a hematologist pathologist from Denver, was a very good friend of mine. And I went out to his home, and he says, that was absolutely a covert human operation. But of course, then you get people who write books like Linda Moulton Howe, an alien harvest, and they're harvesting body parts. Yeah, they are, but it's not ETs. It's a covert human program. So I think the hardest thing, that I've had to deal with, and I was warned about this in 1991 by an old CIA hand, a different guy. He was a character. He was like this chain-smoking, looked like the cigarette man in X-Files, and long hair. And he said, look, the truth about this is so much stranger than the fiction UFOologists believe and that the public believe. And it's going to be the hardest thing. And it's so strange, it covers itself. So, and if you expose the truth, you will discredit yourself because no one wants to hear that truth. They want to hear the narrative we've been selling since the 50s. And that's true. I mean, so it's a very frustrating situation. And so my problem with anyone in this field is that if they don't know what they're talking about, they should be quiet. If they do know what they're talking about and they're spreading disinformation and covering up some of the facts of this, then I have a real problem with them, and I will call them out. I'd call out anyone who would go in that direction, whether it's the President of the United States or whoever it is, because you cannot let this happen. If this happens, we'd be looking at a catastrophic global situation.
Well, have you spoken to Trump personally about this?
I can't comment on the people I'm meeting with intimately right now.
Can neither confirm nor deny it.
Yeah, but okay. I'll just say that there are really good people around him that are trying to find out about this seriously and sincerely. And I think there's very promising, to me, there are very promising developments. If they can stay on track with getting the information and not be gaslit by the disinformation. Because for every person that will go in and give them the truth of what's going on, like Mr. Barber or Herrera, there'll be 10 that are actually counterintelligence and disinformation people gaslighting them. And that's the problem. And how do you have the discernment? Here's the problem. Very busy people, right? I'm busy as hell. I go 7 days a week, 20 hours a day at this point. But if you're the president or the chairman of Senate Intelligence or whatever it is, you've got 100 things a day you got to deal with. You have to have some people who are experts, who are trusted, who can drill down on this and unpack it, because it's way more complicated than anyone realizes. I mean, let's take an example of this. I mean, how wacky and complicated it is. You have one of the most famous UFO cases in history, Cash Landrum, right? You know, that case, for those of you who don't know, it's in this book that just came out. We'll go through that in a minute. Mm-hmm. And it was considered a near crash retrieval operation in outside Houston, north of Houston. And there were 3 people, a little boy, 5-year-old boy, and his mom and his aunt, driving along a highway. And this UFO comes out, descends out of the sky, very unstable, and all kinds of stuff coming out of it. And they were slathered in radioactive waste. And they suffered severe radiation poisoning, had to be hospitalized. And that whole area was sprayed. They had to dig up and redo that road twice because of the amount of radiation. I still think there's a ton of it out there. Now, that was in the, I think, early 80s, mid 80s, something like that, 40 years ago. What that actually was, now, of course, the UFO subculture, that aliens radiated the poor little boy. Well, not so fast. So we have an Air Force intelligence guy who is the principal investigator of that event that we have debriefed, and we have his testimony. And that was an ET craft that they were studying. They could not get the energy system to work. So they foolishly put on a portable nuclear power plant on it to get it going. And it was headed east out of Nevada and was headed east, and it malfunctioned. It had a filter, some kind of circulatory filter system that ruptured and started spewing all this radioactive waste. And there were 4 human pilots on it trying to learn how this thing operated. But it was a non-human craft, yes, but the energy system and the pilots were humans trying to figure out how the thing worked. So this was one of these things that went bad. Now, you can imagine Air Force intelligence and others would love to have people think, oh, well, that was, the aliens did that to those poor people. That's one example of which there are thousands. So when they screw up like that, they're going to be happy to say, oh, the aliens did it. It's like if somebody farts and there's a baby in the room, oh, the baby farted, right? So, I'm sorry to be so crass, but the fact is that happens all the time in this subject. So you have to go to firsthand sources. Like in this case, we have the testimony of the PI, the principal investigator of that event. Now, that takes a lot of work. You know, if you're just sort of a hobbyist on this, or you're someone in Congress who has 2 hours a week, or no, 2 hours a month to drill down on this, you're going to be in a lot of trouble very quickly, misinterpreting things. So I think the people have to insist, you're going to do this. It's a big story, biggest story in human history, frankly, and a huge national security issue. Got to do it right. Cannot do it halfway. Now, Congress so far doesn't have the tools to do that. They almost got them a little over a year ago. And there was the Senate passed a great bill that would have had an amnesty, safe harbor period for these whistleblowers we have. And, I have 760 plus whistleblowers. But we went over to the House for reconciliation. It was part of the defense funding bill, the National Defense Authorization Act. It was called NDAA. It went out of the provisions for amnesty or safe harbor were unanimously passed out of Senate Intelligence. And I actually helped with the folks who were putting that together quietly behind the scenes, writing it. And so it then went over to the House, passed the Senate, not unanimously, but overwhelmingly, went to the House, and there were some people who killed it. And there was, Congressman Turner of the House Intelligence Committee and Mike Rogers of the Armed Services Committee in the House, and some other people killed that thing, ripped those provisions out, and stripped it of anything meaningful. So we then concluded, and I told Jake and other people who a lot of the guys I've been working with are sitting in the wings waiting for something to happen that protects them. They need legal protections because many of them have been in operations that are illegal. They need physical protection because there are wet works, assassination, targeted killings that have been authorized against people. And I know he has had someone on his team killed. I've had people on my team killed over the years. So until that happens, you're out here naked. We're uncovered. Very dangerous. So for people to expect all this to get dealt with, but the government they haven't even figured out that there's lethal force used against high-value whistleblowers. Until that kind of gets through the Congress or an executive order. The president could do this with a stroke of the pen, no question. Absolutely. President has the power to authorize full investigation and DOJ to provide immunity or amnesty. In other words, they'd have to come clean on everything, right? But that's what we're recommending because there's some very high-value whistleblowers who have approached us who want to do it. But right now, we're not protecting them. And these people are patriotic. Like Jake and his guys are very patriotic.
Well, outside of Luis Elizondo, other people actually spoke at this second congressional meeting. Mm-hmm. One of which was Michael Schellenberger, who's an independent journalist, and he claims that an informant gave him a secret 12-page document that went over Immaculate Constellation, which is reverse engineering of UFOs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can you explain this?
Well, that was one compartmented code name, right, that he had information on. He wasn't involved in those projects. I would say what you want to do is go from there to getting full investigatory powers to drill down on who was doing the reverse. We know where they are, and what kind of data ended up getting retrieved. So yes, I mean that's fine, but again, it wasn't someone who was directly boots on the ground, scientists handling the material, et cetera. So that's what we would want, and I think the other gentleman, Mr. Gold, just has looked into it just casually.
You had Michael Gold, who's a former NASA Associate Administrator of Space Policy and Partnership, and also a member of NASA's UAP Independent Study Team. Mm-hmm. So he testified as well.
Yes, but he didn't know anything.
Okay.
And I met with him privately, and he admitted that they basically closed that task force because they didn't have people that were staffed to go out and gather all this information. So what good does that? I said, why do you, this is the other thing I said to Burchett. Why do you have, Congressman Burchett, why do you want people here who admit they don't have anything? When I've told you that there are all these people who will go up there today who handle the materials. There's something not right with this picture. I'm calling them out right now, and I haven't done this yet. Is that get serious or go home, right? But somebody needs to get serious about this, because I think all this is going to come out in the next year or two. And when it does, it's got to come out properly. One person very close to the intelligence community told me after the election, he said, if this comes out the way it's being directed now, it'll be 1,000 times worse than COVID. It'd be a global catastrophe. So there's 1,000 ways this goes wrong. There's one way that it can come out correctly and not end up in panic and false wars and all kinds of problems. And it has to be very seriously looked at by some people with the acumen and expertise to know, what's the strategic pathway out of this mess. And I think one of them is there are a lot of people in these covert programs really want to come forward. They do. There are a whole bunch of people like that. But there's not a path for them now yet that's safe.
Well, the other person that was at this hearing was Tim Gallaudet.
Gallaudet.
Mm-hmm. Gallaudet, right. Who was a retired rear admiral with the U.S. Navy. Mm-hmm. Now, is this someone who knew what they were talking about?
My understanding is that he's also sort of an operative.
Okay.
Yeah. Like Lou. And, look, these guys have their slice of here's what you're supposed to do and say. And there, too, I think that it's much better if you pull in people who are more the boots on the ground guys, rather than folks who have a questionable agenda. And that hasn't happened yet. I have not seen a single person except the people. I will say this. The Senate Armed Services and Intelligence Committee have met with some very excellent, serious people that we have brought in, and some from other sources, that they have privately provided information. And then, at least back until about a year ago, we would then take them over. They would take them over after I handed them off and would take them over to the Senate. They would then be taken over to the Aero office at the Pentagon. But of course, that ended up being a total storefront fraud that just covered up all their testimony, as you know. Or if you don't, we'll talk about that.
Well, this was the second congressional meeting. The first one happened in 2023. Mm-hmm. And David Grush essentially led the charge in that first hearing. Mm-hmm. What's your take on David Grush?
Oh, well, I think, first of all, I met with him when he was undercover and provided information to his bosses and him on this. And that's how they were able to get to a lot of the information he found. But again, he's a secondhand witness. He was not a primary person. Now, he ended up meeting primaries, okay? So after there was enough actionable intelligence of where the locations of these facilities and secret bases and stuff. And he did. So, but here's a caveat. He ended up going over and was kind of intercepted by Lou Elizondo. And then he started telling tall tales about aliens blowing up villages in South America or Africa and stuff. Things he was not read onto. And so here's one of the problems. The whole ufology milieu, that whole environment is sort of a snake pit or a sand trap where people just get pulled in. And so what he's talked about, I know for a fact he was speaking the truth about that there were these facilities, that we have reverse engineered the craft, all of that, 100% correct. Where I have a problem, and this I've talked to my own whistleblowers about this, to stay with what you directly know. Don't start getting stuff secondhand and speaking on it as if it's something you have firsthand knowledge of. So I'm I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist, I've been doing this for 35 years. That's where you go sideways, right? So your question's a good one, but it doesn't have a simple answer. The answer is yes. The core of what he spoke to that he investigated directly, correct. Much of what was said that was peripheral, that he picked up from the culture, let's say, of these folks who intercepted him, who are slick disinformation people who are very well trained. that is where he got into trouble. And so now the reason so many people hate me is that I call that out. I go, no, that was correct. That's not correct. And it's someone's got to do that. I mean, otherwise the public and the Congress, who don't know anything about the subject, are going to keep getting this bad mix of good information with toxic disinformation that's designed to take the narrative into the alien threat world, or designed to take it into some other direction that serves the military-industrial complex and this sort of global effort of people who want to, kind of the Independence Day thing. Let's unite the world around an alien threat. This sort of idiotic narrative.
Well, after the first congressional meeting, the Pentagon actually went through the report and announced that there was no evidence of any alien technology in the report.
Total nonsense. And you're talking about the Pentagon report.
Yeah.
So Dr. Kirkpatrick, who is the head of AARO, has committed multiple felonies. And I'm making a statement here. It's a strong statement. And I can tell you there are firsthand people corroborating this. So we have, and you'll see it in our archive, the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, free to anyone who wants to get in there, dpiarchive.com. 35 years of evidence and information in there. Nobody reads it because nobody reads. It's politically incorrect to read. But if you still read, it's all in there. Now, what you'll find is there was a letter from the chair and co-chair of Senate Intelligence Committee castigating AARO and Dr. Kirkpatrick because they knew he was sanitizing his reports of the actual evidence and testimony of people like Michael Herrera. They later issued a public report without naming Herrera and totally falsified what he said that was. They said he saw an extraterrestrial vehicle when he clearly said it was man-made, staffed with people that looked like special projects humans, some kind of special operations group, but private. They didn't have any military insignia. So this has happened. And here's the problem. He didn't know this. A lot of the people who were brought through and referred over from Senate Intel and Armed Services were guys I brought there, but he didn't know that. And we were watching. And so the things they shared in the skiff, couldn't come out, right? But I knew because I was their original debriefer. And so, bang, this got reported back to the chairs of the committee, and they wrote this letter, admonishing. But that continued and continued and continued. So much so, there's a man who received a multi-million-dollar contract I've met with recently, and he had set up sensors and tracking, daytime, radar, signals intelligence, photographic of these UAPs. And he had about 1.5 terabytes of data, gave it over to AARO and to Dr. Kirkpatrick, and it vanished. The new director can't even find it. It was never provided over to the oversight committees. This is something we're in the process of fixing. So you cannot be set up and receive millions of dollars in taxpayers' funding with the mandate to honestly investigate something and then end up being a cover-up artist, which is what Dr. Kirkpatrick did. This is why most of the whistleblowers I know wouldn't touch that office with a 10-foot pole, because the people over the last 3 years that we brought through there saw how their evidence and testimony was either covered up or distorted, deliberately distorted, factually distorted. And that is a felony because you're reporting falsely back to the Congress. And there's a law mandating here's what you're doing. So this is why, I talk to some of the people in law enforcement federally. I go, hello, anyone want to enforce the law? Right? Because if I were to pull a stunt like that, I'd be in shackles, right? So why? Why are these bad actors immune from lying to Congress, falsifying reports, whatever it is? So that's a big problem. So whatever, how do you know they're lying? I learned this in 1993 after I briefed the director of the CIA. Their lips are moving. In Washington, these people, how do you know they're lying? Their lips are moving. So on this subject, I'm sorry I sound so cynical, but, I'm too old and too tired to pretend that it's just not a bunch of chicanery.
Well, Netflix had a series called Investigation Alien.
Never saw it, never heard of it.
It was hosted by journalist George Knapp. And one of the big things in terms of the focus on the series was this jellyfish UFO video from Iraq. You know what I'm talking about? Now, I looked at this video, I did some searches online. What a lot of people are saying is it's actually just a bunch of balloons that are just flying through there based on a wind. And, as someone who has, helium balloons in my house sometimes, you see how they just sort of
them. I've seen that.
Yeah. At one point, they get a little bit low, then they just sort of float around the room at eye level. And that's what it kind of looked like to me. Now, did you think that this was an actual jellyfish alien or?
No, I didn't. And
okay, I didn't either.
But again, I'm not involved with that. I have no provenance of its origin. It's not something I've really looked into. I try to avoid the things that are in the pop culture. I hate to say it. So you probably know a lot more about all that than I ever will. And I'm too busy to sit and look at pablum that comes out on whatever. So I'm just being honest. I really don't. A lot of what you might ask about, I have no knowledge of. I don't have time for it. And it's usually such nonsense that I just, 30 seconds in, I turn it off. But so I just don't know. I mean, okay. But I don't have I don't have anyone in the intelligence and military or aerospace contracting world that's brought that up to me as something of interest. Yeah. So that's all I can say.
What about the whole New Jersey drone situation?
All the drones is another story. Those were false flag operations designed to get people all riled up, like the War of the Worlds in New Jersey in the 30s. What is it, Orson Welles or somebody? But the White House did make a mistake in saying that all of those were test objects that were known by FAA. I mean, I was on a news program with a lieutenant general who said that's absolutely not the case. And the people I know who under contract for one of the aerospace companies went out there to investigate them concluded what I did, and that it was some type of testing of media and public reaction as sort of a false flag to see what people would say and do and see what kind of rumors could be spun off from it. So oftentimes they'll do sort of a trial balloon of this false alien invasion stuff, but 100% of that was, even the things that look like orbs and stuff, those were ours. That's all ours. And it was a false flag operation. What I understand that is that when you had, let's unpack this a little further, between about a year ago and November, the plan was for a high-level group of whistleblowers that included Jake and some of his folks, were not going to come out publicly. They were simply going to take all the hard evidence they had, hand it over. We were going to put it out on a blockchain system, and it would come out, right? And it was explained that that would be too catastrophic because it would be so explosive. And so they decided to do this slower, controlled process and wait, but also to unmask themselves, right, where they would come forward publicly, which changes OPSEC, operational security, completely. Because now you're identified. You are identified, right, as an individual. And you, therefore, are at risk. So it changed the whole plans. But when it was going to be, and when these drones, even all the way until shortly before the inauguration, we thought there was going to be a dump, a big release of enormous amount of dispositive proof and evidence, and that didn't happen. And but when that was still in the planning and discussion, they launched, anticipatory to that, all these drones and orbs and what have you, because they wanted people to start thinking that everything that they were going to disclose was somehow related to just drones and experimental things. So it was a psyop, basically, that was done in anticipation of events that were planned that ended up not coming to fruition because it was decided these guys would come out publicly rather than stay clandestine and masked but just let the evidence out. So I think the thinking in that group was that this needs to be a more controlled release with executive orders and congressional actions providing a pathway. And there are some very senior people. There's a chairman of a major corporation, a household name in America, who's reached out to me, who has documents and all this evidence. And as soon as he reached out to me, he had his family threatened, his grandchildren and children. And right now, if he were to come forward, his concern, aside from perhaps having all his wealth confiscated under RICO, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act, which is like what you use against the mafia. Because this organization running this is like the world's largest mafia, organized crime network. So he can't come out because the Congress never got amnesty through. It was killed about a year ago in December of 2023. And so far, look, the president's only been there a month, but there's not been any executive orders that explicitly would give a pathway both for personal protection, like marshals, or legal protection, which would be like immunization or amnesty or safe harbor. So that's really what needs to happen for us to get the most important material out and also to get these people secured. But I think there's something that we can do besides that. And if you want to hear about it, a little spooky, but interesting.
Well, Elon Musk, Trump's new best friend.
I don't know him.
But he's consistently said that he's never seen any signs of aliens or UFOs. And this is someone who regularly launches ships into space.
Well, it's not like he's on board those ships.
No.
And look, it's not as if every airline pilot has seen these, but there are many who have. There's one sitting in our room right here, all right? Captain of a major airline.
Wait. Hold on. So this person sitting next to us has seen what?
These UFOs while he's been flying his jets for a major airline.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you willing to jump in at some point and talk about it?
It's totally up to him. But
okay,
but,
hold on. Are you willing to talk about it? Sure. All right, we'll bring you in a little bit. Okay.
Look, I don't hang with just every idiot. Right?
Yeah. I mean, just me.
The people who just sort of hang in my orbit are going to be folks like that. That's right.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we'll get to that. So go on.
Where was I?
Elon Musk.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that he would have been read onto this or read into it. Now, whether he really has no knowledge of this, or he has information and has been told not to go there, I don't know. I think what I would recommend to Mr. Musk is you should not comment on things you don't know anything about. And if you do know about it, never lie to the public. It's best to say, I really don't know, or deflect. So my advice, if Mr. Musk is listening, I doubt he is, but is that never make a false statement. And if you express an opinion, have it be an informed opinion. So I think that is what is important to do. Because otherwise, people are going to be suspicious. When all this comes out, those comments by all kinds of officials are going to come back to haunt them. It's like, well, did you not know? In which case, what kind of researcher are you? Or you did know and you were lying to the public. Neither are very good outcomes. So what I'm recommending to people who are in official positions, in public positions, is either say nothing or speak the truth. But don't say something that is based on you're not knowing something. Now, I wouldn't mind if someone does a qualifier and says, I haven't looked into this, but to my knowledge, I don't know anything about it, or whatever. Because that's fair game, right? And that's an appropriate response. I answer questions like that all the time. Like, you just asked me about this jellyfish. Well, it's not my expertise. I haven't heard anything about it. And, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And as an emergency and trauma guy, the worst doctors think they know everything, and they're the ones who are going to kill you. So I tell people, and the worst pilots are the ones that they think they know everything, They don't listen to the co-pilot, and they crash right to the side of a mountain. So I think that a little bit of introspection and humility is needed if you're in a powerful position where you don't go off talking about things you really aren't knowledgeable about. It's best just to say nothing.
Well, Tom DeLonge, who's the co-founder of Blink-182 and who's worked with you.
Oh, way back when he was a kid. Yeah, we had.
Yeah. To the Stars Academy. That was the one thing that you guys worked on together?
Oh, no. That was Lou Elizondo intercepted him, gaslit him, used him, and spit him out.
Oh, okay.
So go look at that. Yeah.
Got it. So you weren't involved in that at all?
No. Tom DeLonge and I predate that going back to the early 2000s, I think, after the Disclosure Project press conference in 2001. And then, I got to know those guys, and they were fun. We had a good time. But yeah.
Do you still keep in contact with Tom?
I haven't in a while, because once he got pulled into the disinformation nexus, right? Then he got convinced that evil alien, there were these good and bad evil aliens in a war, and then he got convinced, and then he got pulled in by Lou Elizondo into doing To the Stars Academy, and then he got run over by those guys. So I mean, it's a sad story. I really try to stick with people who can kind of stay on track, and but no, I never. I mean, Tom DeLonge was a great guy. We had good times together, and interesting person.
Now, David Grush, do you guys still keep in contact?
No, I haven't been, because I try to keep myself free of folks who don't stay on the straight and narrow when it comes to what they know. Because as soon as we were doing our National Press Club event in 2023 in June, and it broke in all the news that he was talking about the aliens blowing up villages and killing innocent people. Interestingly, the year before, or 2 years before, we had uncovered that in the Dr. Jacques Vallée, in one of his books in 1992, put an entry in that he had received a CIA document from 1985 chronicling or documenting the fact that the CIA was running abductions on, quote, peasants in Brazil and Argentina for its psychological warfare value. I am quoting. Now, we're trying to get that original document, but I think a couple people I know who have it have been told, don't provide that, you're a dead man. So, but that is a fact. That's 40 years ago, that there's a document that proves that the PSYOPs, psychological warfare operations out of the agency, were conducting abductions exactly for the reasons we've warned about. So I tell people that is a fact, and it's a fact that needs to be proven as this whole subject is disclosed. Otherwise, it's going to be the UFOs are real, ETs are real, and they're here to eat us for lunch. Now we have to go to war, right? It's Pavlovian. I mean, it's almost like a automaticity, like that little first grader, 6-year-old going, aren't you afraid of being abducted? I'm going, no, not unless there's a covert human team.
Well, you've said there's 69 different types of extraterrestrials.
Well, that they knew of in 1960s. There may be many more now.
Okay. And are these aliens from different planets, or?
Yes, I'm quite sure they would be from different star systems because of the diversity of the biological form and size. I mean, some are 1.5 feet tall. Some reported to be 10, 12 feet tall. To my knowledge, they're all bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs, had sort of that form, but then a huge amount of variation within that form. And this would explain why some of those craft are very, very tiny and some very large. I mean, if you're a 2 foot, 3 foot tall being, a 25, 30 foot diameter egg-shaped craft is kind of spacious, right? It's like us being in something 60 feet, proportionally.
What are the size differences? I mean, are there like insect-sized aliens and giant, like whale-sized aliens? I mean, what's the range? Because it could technically be anything, right? I mean, because
yes.
Like in our case, you talked about this in some of your interviews, humans evolved from monkeys, right? And monkeys are warlike. Yeah. They kill each other, right. they fight,
organizing the troops,
and so forth. But if you had a species that evolved from, let's say, dolphins or something like that aren't warlike,
right?
this might be an alien species that don't kill each other, and they don't understand why humans are killing each other all the time.
Right. They don't. They understand it. They just think that it's a shame we haven't evolved past it.
Right. So in terms of the alien species that you're familiar with, what's the range? Are they all like little gray men, or are they just completely different?
Oh, no. They're totally different. And most of the ones that you see on the spooky covers of books and at least those are ours. Those are our robotic fake aliens. Those are the CIA drones and robotic objects. And the really sophisticated ones are actually bio-nano machines where they have biological material that's what they were using, the culture material from the cattle and animal mutilations was being used to make those very sophisticated fake aliens. There's a physicist that I know who worked on those programs. And it really sounds like Mingala or Stranger Things or something. But the strangest things are true, my friend. And so, in terms of my personal knowledge, I have heard of ones 1.5 feet or so tall to ones that range the upper end 30 to 40 feet tall.
30 or 40 feet?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's, pretty rare. And, depending on the planet and the gravitational and everything else. I mean, look, there are humans that have been 8 feet tall and there are humans that have been 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
So I think about the cosmos and how vast. I mean, it would make sense there'd be enormous diversity. And this brings to another question. I mean, you talk about war. The only way Homo sapiens, humans, evolved past where we're stuck is, people say, well, this sounds like a spiritual discussion now. I say, well, maybe it is that we have to find some foundation for our commonality, our oneness. And it can't be that we're just human, because now we have non-humans that we're dealing with. So what is that? I always tell people it's at that deep level of the pure level of quiet consciousness or spirit that they've done studies is actually a singularity. Ernst Schrödinger, the father of modern particle wave theory and quantum physics, in 1908 he said that the total number of minds in the universe is one. That is, it's a singularity. And so that's the foundation of the CE5 contact protocols, because not only is the consciousness field not limited by space or time, but also the understanding and experience of that, whether it's in a meditative state or even just intellectually understanding it, becomes the foundation of you looking into the eyes of a non-human extraterrestrial or a person on this planet who may be a different race or a different culture or whatever, and seeing beyond the superficial and seeing right into the soul, or right into the conscious being that's in there. And beyond that, this sort of clear light of pure consciousness. Like when you go into the deep meditative state, the kind of samadhi or whatever. Before I was a doctor, I was a meditation teacher. And so I really did a deep dive into that because when I was 17, I had a near-death experience. And it really opened up that universe to me. Because my family were atheists, and if an infant test tube didn't exist. So, But that near-death experience when I was 17 was where I experienced for a period of time when I was away the unbounded cosmic aspect of our own consciousness. It wasn't that I went somewhere. I realized that's what's within us. And so when you have that experience, then you realize that's why our motto is one universe, one people. So we don't view them as alien. I hate the word alien because it connotes foreignness and xenophobia. I usually use the word ET people or ET civilizations, non-human civilizations.
Well, you talked about how you interacted with extraterrestrials by going into a meditative state and sometimes using very psychedelics.
Never.
Never?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Never. Now, they'll do that to the P3 operators, all kinds of drugs and stuff. No, my group, listen, I know.
So you're not taking any drugs at all?
Never.
Because that's what I assumed. It was a bunch of guys,
if I have a
girls getting high and just seeing a bunch of weird lights. Like,
no,
it's not that.
No, we never do any drugs.
Okay,
and in
fair
fact,
enough.
It's against protocol completely. But,
got it.
And it's not necessary. Now, Can you have a breakthrough moment with some of those substances? Yes, but even the shaman that teach things like ayahuasca will say that if you did it once as a gateway thing, but what happens is that then people use it as a crutch, and they don't just do it once to get to a breakout moment. It becomes something that's and this is the typical Western use of substances, right? Everything, whether it's weed or booze or this or that. It's an addictive, materialistic view instead of something useful. So I am actually quite skeptical of that, even though I know the zeitgeist is in that direction. But it's not necessary. So, I teach people, and the CE5 Contact app has a whole meditation training course in it. And none of it involves any substances and isn't necessary. And we have the most extraordinary experiences in consciousness, but also in what we see. And I think that is something that people need to realize. Everything you need, you naturally already have. It's all within us. Now, if you need some augmentation or whatever fires your rockets, I've never done any of that stuff and haven't needed to. But maybe I was lucky. I died when I was 17. I had a near-death experience. I mean, lucky, unlucky, whatever you want to look at. Survived it, obviously, because here we are. But it was something that taught me that aspect of our own self that's awake, that is expanded, it connects to this sort of cosmic mind, great being, the native people. My grandmother was Cherokee. So that is always within all of us and all things and all places. So once you understand that and experience it, and that's the beauty of some of the science that's been done around the science of consciousness by Dr. John at Princeton. I spoke with him before he died. He had the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab where they had people putting their awareness on random number generators, no wires, not like Neuralink, what Elon's doing, but just look at them and intend the random number generator to spit out more ones than zeros, and it would, statistically significant. What was interesting, if there were two people doing it who loved each other, it was an exponential increase. This is why I tell people when we do these close encounters of the fifth kind, the CE5 contact protocol, when you do it with a few people, not a huge crowd. I do it with huge crowds, but when you do it with as few people and there's coherence and brotherhood, sisterhood, love in that group, it has this very powerful effect. That's almost like a magnet to these advanced civilizations because they know that the future of humanity rests on humans having not just technological development, but social and spiritual development simultaneously, which is, of course, sorely lacking. And by spirituality, I'm not referring to organized religion per se. I'm talking about something that transcends organized religion into sort of the meaning of religion is from the religio, is to return to the source. Well, the source of all intelligent life is this unbounded state of consciousness, samadhi, whatever you want to call it.
Have you ever had any contact with people from Heaven's Gate?
No.
Are you familiar with what this is?
I knew it was a cult that did mass suicide down in San Diego right as we were doing the first congressional briefings privately in 97.
Right.
That's all I know because I remember it was a disaster.
It was based on aliens. It was based on them thinking that this alien ship was going to come down and take them all into heaven and so forth, and then ultimately ended in a mass suicide.
Yeah.
So you have groups out there that take these alien concepts and kind of twist them into strange cults and so forth that sometimes end in the worst possible way, like Heaven's Gate. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that people should not be part of a cult like that. What I tell people is that the reason I refuse to, I kind of, the people who know me well know I can be a little bit brusque and profane because I do not want to be someone's guru.
In other words, people accuse you of this? I mean, you have these big meetings out where people meditate and so forth. I mean, that's could be viewed as a cult by some people.
Oh, well, I mean, so you go to a football game, you're at a cult because you're with fans. I mean, this is stupid.
Right.
No offense, enough. That's a stupid comment.
Fair enough.
So,
Fair enough. Yeah.
Again, it's dumb as shit. All right?
Okay.
So, yes, people go out and we do this together. Sometimes we train large groups. But it's not something where there's some kind of a cult-like protocol. In fact, if you ever went to one, which you should, you'll learn that I tell everyone, whatever it is we're doing in medicine as a doctor, here's the ethos. See one, do one, teach one. You see it done once. The next time you're doing it yourself on your own. The third time you're teaching a second-year medical student, right? And so the idea is that everyone empowers themselves to master this capability, both in consciousness, but also as an operational team, and make peaceful contact. That's our ethos right there. Now, there's nothing cult-like about it. Now, a lot of people, if you use anything that people disregard as woo-woo, consciousness and meditation, you are a priori a cult. Well, that's ridiculous also. Now, could someone turn it into that? Yeah, and I had a talk with a wonderful man named Tony Robbins about this, and he wrote a book, I'm Not Your Guru, right? And so that's kind of how I feel with people. I like teaching, I like showing people, but ultimately I don't want you to, a bunch of chelas or devotees. No, learn this and then go do it yourself and empower yourself. So if anything, I'm in the anti-cult approach to this very strongly, which is also why, I think that but you hit on a good point, and that is it's slippery slope.
Yeah.
Very
exactly.
slippery slope.
Very slippery. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why I make it very clear that ain't me. Don't do that. Now, there are people who try to spin off what I'm doing, create their own little cults, right? So that's different. But, and I can't control that because people are going to do what they're going to do. But there's no reason why people can't have someone who teaches them. It doesn't mean that, and you can respect the teacher, but it doesn't mean you have to then become some slavish person to someone channeling, goobop baloop from the planet Kahua, or whatever it is. It's like, come on, use your own brain, use your own consciousness and faculties, and do this yourself. You know what I like the most? I got a couple of years ago, I got an email. I don't check my own I have people who do that. But it was this truck driver in Croatia. And he was going along, and he had the CE5 app, CE5 contact app. And he stopped, it was late at night, to a pullout. There was nobody out in the mountains, Croatia. And he was doing the whole meditation. And he kind of felt that he made contact. Suddenly, a very kind of circular ET craft materialized and went from left to right over in front of his cab, and vanished. And he wrote this, and this was just like a bloke who was like, you'd have a beer with at a pub who's a truck driver. And I went, yes, that is exactly right. And, because what I tell people is everyone who's a human is conscious, and that consciousness is the singularity. And so I think it doesn't matter how your intelligence, your training, whether you're rich, whether you're poor. I grew up in a 2-room shack with no heat, no air conditioning, abandoned on the streets. I was very poor in the South, North Carolina. So I tell people anyone can do this, right? And I think the where people get into trouble is where they give their power up to a leader, a religious, whether it's political or religious or someone else, right? So I'm very strict about independent investigation of the truth, critical thinking, doing things on your own, and like I tell people, don't take my word for it, try it. On the evidence we have, don't take my word for it. Go look at the 115 whistleblowers we have in our archive with their testimony, name, rank, and serial number. Have you seen them? When I tell people, like Mr. Musk, I'd say, well, have you looked at that? These are named firsthand whistleblowers, 115 of them, on a silver platter. I spent $20 million putting this together. Who's looking at it?
Wait, you spent $20 million?
Oh, at least over the last 30 years doing this.
Really?
Yes.
Well, where did the money come from?
Me, my work. And as a doctor, I've sacrificed a lot. I don't talk about it, and donors. We've had
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
were there a lot of donors that came in with money?
Yeah, over years, yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's a huge expense. Just flying all these witnesses into Washington, putting on those press conferences. You're talking 7 digits here. So, and that's why people say, oh, there's a tuition for what you're doing. I say, yeah, it needs to be 10 times that. So shut up and say thank you. But, right. Look, I've given up $500,000-$600,000 a year for years to do this for free, right? I don't get paid, right?
Yeah.
Right. So who's paying me? The U.S. government? No. So I push back very hard on that, and I say there needs to be support for this. This is the other problem, is that if you sell a bunch of nonsense in snake oil, you'll get millions of dollars in contracts from the U.S. government, like Bigelow Aerospace did, $22 million, flushed it down the toilet. If you're actually doing the hard work, you get nada, right? So it's a very unrewarding profession. Let me just put it that way. But I feel like I have a purpose here to do. We have the knowledge, we have the information, we know what the consequences are. So I guess to those who have great knowledge on something, they have great responsibility. So I take that very seriously, but it's an ethical decision, not a financial one.
Well, you mentioned that there's underwater UFOs.
Oh yeah, lots. They've been tracked for decades.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense because we've really explored the oceans barely at all.
Yes, yeah.
Like, probably 95% of the ocean has been completely unexplored.
And 2/3 of the Earth is covered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, are there actual alien bases at the bottom of the ocean and so forth?
There are both human and non-human assets that have been in the ocean.
Really?
Yeah.
Like Atlantis, kind of?
Well, I do know that out in that area there's some strange phenomenon, and
What area do you mean?
like what used to be called the Bermuda Triangle.
Bermuda Triangle.
Like that.
Okay, I heard about this in the 80s, where planes would just disappear and so forth.
And
you're saying that's a real thing?
Yes, but that was a underwater covert human array, electromagnetic array.
Okay.
There's a similar one down at the South Pole. We had a new whistleblower with Raytheon describe a mile under the ice these neutrino light emitters and detectors that are down there at the South Pole, not Antarctica, South Pole. And you can look at his testimony, Eric Hecker, who was down there for a year at that base. And so there's a lot of unusual things that are placed under the ocean. Then there have been extraterrestrial vehicles, and I understand even bases that could be deep because they can go through any medium. Some people call it transmedium. In other words, you can go through water, solid rock, et cetera, and so on. So the technology allows for passing straight through solid matter.
Well, yeah, because you said teleportation is a real thing.
Yes.
And this is what you're talking about.
No, that's separate. A teleportation is based on quantum entanglement, but basically what Einstein called the spooky effect, where you could have the same particle two places simultaneously. So a teleportation would be it's here, and it's through a quantum entanglement resonance. Whereas something that would look 3D, even the sun shining on it, could pass straight through into a mountain because the resonant frequency of the matter and the electronics of that craft cause it to mostly be unaligned with the matrix, let's call it, of matter in this dimension. So, and it gets a little esoteric, but if you can visualize my body, 6'4" and weigh 220. If you were to take out all the space between the atoms and molecules, all the mass of my body would fit on the tip of a needle of a pin.
Yeah.
All right. So, but it's this size. So what if you took this a little bit out of angular momentum frequency? Then this body could walk right through that wall, and my atoms would not touch those atoms.
Because you're going between the atoms?
Yes, because you're passing in the space between.
Okay.
All right. I mean, it gets into some esoteric physics.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the cover-up is really focused on world energy and how trillions and trillions of dollars are made with oil, gas, fossil fuels, and so forth. And you're basically saying that the U.S. and possibly other governments have unlimited clean energy.
Sure.
Using alien technology.
Well, not the U.S. government that's constitutional, but the secret government does.
Okay.
There are two governments.
Right.
At least two.
Right. So what they're saying, well, what you're saying is that if this was actually uncovered, all these industries would collapse in one day.
Well,
but it would benefit the Earth.
Here's the thing. And I was on a show Patrick David has a show.
Yeah, I know
was
Patrick. I
on,
interviewed him.
And this came up in that interview. I said, look, if someone came in right now and put on that table one of these 0 point or free energy devices, to get it from that phase to where it's being manufactured, mass manufacturing, to replace the 1.5 billion motor vehicle engines in the world, and to provide all the energy for 2.5 billion homes on the planet, plus all the hundreds of millions of businesses, factories, that's going to be 15, 20 years. If you did it like the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II. So it's not as if there isn't going to be a transition, because just logistically, it's not possible to make it happen all at once. But it would eventually cause the elimination of the need for all fossil fuels, nuclear, wind, solar, geothermal, hydroelectric dams. All of it would be obsolete. Now, my argument is that should have happened 100 years ago. That's why we did the documentary, The Lost Century, right? Now, the most recent documentary we released is called Battle for Disclosure. And if you look at Battle for Disclosure, that deals with some of this as well, because the big question is going to be, do we do a real honest disclosure or sort of a fake one, light one? Because an honest one is going to include the man-made. I mentioned this earlier. That's a bigger secret than the non-human, right?
Well, are you talking about a 0 point quantum vacuum spacetime?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about right now.
Sure. And we can put, you know, I'm meeting with someone, what is today? Yeah, tomorrow, who's a inventor and has 20 patents and has come across this and doesn't know what to do with it. So that has to be open sourced, you know, or it has to be put out without patents and released massively. Because over the last 100 years, anyone who's tried to use a conventional business model or the patent office have had it seized. You know, we can prove this. And meanwhile, you know, the Earth is being greatly damaged by how, look, there are 8 billion people living on the planet like we did in the 1800s in the Industrial Revolution. You know, oil, gas, coal, the roads, internal combustion engines. That was Mercedes, 1888. Even rockets, 1940s, Werner von Braun. So, you know, and nuclear, 1945. So I always ask people, do you really think there's been no developments in energy generation in 80 years? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I've
but
actually
it's been ruthlessly suppressed.
No, I had a conversation with someone about this recently, where if you really think about it, when you get into a plane and you fly across country, it's pretty much the same thing as doing it in the 70s.
Oh.
50 years
60s.
later, the planes go about as fast. They're about as big.
Right.
And there's really no major difference
Right.
in flying now. I mean, maybe the planes are a little nicer and the seats are a little cushier, but that's about it.
The same as a 707 in the early 60s.
Yeah.
So we're talking 60 years later.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's really been almost no technological developments in air travel.
Or
not commercial air travel.
Or energy generation, even more fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, we're still using nuclear, we're still using coal, we're still using gas. Solar power is not quite there yet.
No. And it's never going to get there, not the way it's configured. Now, there have been people who've done what are called solar collectors. That isn't just the normal photons, but all the energy that comes from the sun that rectifies it into very powerful, like something this big that would run your house. Those have all been confiscated. I've spoken to a couple of inventors. And if people doubt it, go look at the 2010 report by the Federation of American Scientists. It may be in the briefing document here that I'm going to give you. It's the president's and the Congress's briefing document, redacted of certain things, but you'll have a copy. And people can order it now and go to drstephengreer.com and order this. It just came out this week. So that technology should have been out decades ago, and it would have enabled us to have a civilization by now with no pollution and no poverty. But of course, whether it was 100 years ago in the time of Tesla, the real Tesla, not the Tesla car company, or now, it's the same powerful industrial global interests that don't want it out, right? To the detriment of 99.999% of humanity. So at a certain point, I think that we're going to have to say, well, we have to start that process somehow. And this document, this research by the Federation of American Scientists found that in 1970, there was a solar panel as efficient or more than anything we have today, and it had a national security seizure order on it because the price point of that would have competed with coal and gas back then, 50-some years ago. So this nonsense, the abuse, here it is, the abuse of the National Security Authority under patent and invention laws, and that continues even if you don't patent your technology, stormtroopers will come into your lab and take it, right? You don't even have to apply for a patent once they find out you have something like that. So this thuggery, which is what it is, makes a mockery out of democracy, but also out of a free market. You know, everybody about, oh, we have a free market economy. I said, like the hell we do. I mean, how do you have a free market economy if the most important inventions of the last 100 years have been ruthlessly suppressed to the benefit of a handful of global oligarchs? Nonsense. It's utterly ridiculous. It's a myth.
Well, you said that the alien crisis that no one is talking about is humans reverse engineering ET technology to use against other ETs.
Yes.
So we're developing alien weapons to kill other aliens?
Right. So this is a real problem because I mentioned earlier the technology curve isn't flat. You know, it's actually exponential. And so you have people who have reverse engineered extraterrestrial technologies from craft that we've acquired.
Okay. Are you talking about scalar waves?
Part of it.
Part of it.
And more. And then those then get turned into weapon systems that are used against non-human craft and ETs to down more of them, to study more of them. Right?
Okay. So it's not that we just want to kill ETs, but we want more technology.
Oh yeah, so it's a money and technology grab, pure and simple.
What are scalar waves?
So scalar, Tesla, I think, was an early sort of person who described and experimented with them, I think in the 20s, 30s perhaps. I have to look it up. But a scalar, so the light we see in this room, just make it really simple, is a wave, right? So it's the vacuum, as it were. You have this wavelength of light passing through at 186,000 miles per second. So every second, it goes 186,000 miles. A light year is 186,000 miles every second for a whole year. That is one light year. It's okay. Now, imagine what if you had what they call a scalar. It's actually a point that comes out in a straight line. So it's not propagating in a waveform, which means it's multiples of the speed of light, which means it goes boom, like multiples of the speed. So when we detonated the first atomic bomb, for example, this gets back to why all the ETs started coming in force in the 40s and 50s, is that it attendant with the electromagnetic pulse, which everybody knows what that is. You can put an EMP up above LA and take out the whole grid, right? But an electromagnetic pulse has within it a scalar signal that propagates at multiples of the speed of light and disrupts interstellar communication and travel. That's why it sort of rips the fabric of the 3D cosmos. So that's why once we started detonating those, it was one MI6 guy I interviewed years ago. He had been military intelligence in Great Britain, and then he published a magazine called Flying Saucer Review. Don't you love the name? And I interviewed him at his cottage in England, and great guy, brilliant guy. He says, when we did that, we kind of kicked a hornet's nest because it not only was very disruptive to these other civilizations' systems, because we're thinking straight line here to another star system taking 8 years at the speed of light. No. Forget that. We're now talking about trans-dimensional technologies and scalar ones that are much faster. And so the ETs knew, whoa, a big red flag over planet Earth. We've gone from machine guns or muskets or bows and arrows to thermonuclear weapons, right, within about 100 years. Think about it. From 1945, the atomic bomb, 100 years earlier, 1845, what were we using? Rifle. We didn't have a machine gun. We didn't even have tanks. We didn't have airplanes. So in 100 years, imagine if your civilization's monitoring the Earth, and they have been. And we go from that, even though it's dysfunctional that we're having endless wars, but we go from that to a technological breakthrough where we are not only a threat to all life on Earth, we're now a threat to other planets because they can extrapolate into the future. And then add to that, we started studying very advanced extraterrestrial technologies. And to give you an idea how advanced they are, I'll just give a little quote from the director of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the president of the Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, the week he died, before he died. He spoke to a friend of mine, James Goodall, who's an aerospace historian, illustrator, and he said, he says, anything you can imagine or that you've seen on Star Trek, we've already done at the Skunk Works. It's out in the desert. He says, but not Area 51. I know where it is. I've been to the site where that is. And so whatever people think humans have figured out, it's way more. But imagine that being in the hands of a group of sociopaths, right, with the kind of malcontents and sociopathic behavior they have. That is a serious national security threat and a world security threat. It's a five-alarm fire. No one's looking at it because if you don't know about it, you're not looking at the problem, right? And that's true whether it's the president or the prime minister of the UK or the Congress or whoever it is. So when I realized this, this is part of what led me to leave my medical career and work on this, is that this is a great problem. It's got to get fixed. And ultimately, I think the most dangerous part of this is that I've heard from 3 different sources, don't know each other, who've been in communication centers, that ETs can only allow us to go so far using that kind of technology against non-humans, because then we become an existential threat to other places, right? So if we humans don't fix this and stand down those quite frankly, illegal covert operations, they'll have to. But then it will look like Independence Day, right? So we do not want to have that as the option. We want to fix this. Humans need to fix this ourselves. But it's going to take a lot of courage. There are 3 things so far been lacking in the 35 years I've been doing this from our leaders, not from these special forces guys I work with. They're amazing. But it's 3 things. I call it EC. It's like going to Paris here, ICI. It's the intelligence to understand this and really drill down on it. It's the courage to take it on because you're going to have everything thrown at you. And the integrity not to get bought off or bribed or blackmailed. Those are hard things. That's the trifecta of what's needed to do this. And that's going to be the test for Congress and the president, whoever it is, right? Because I know what's going to be thrown at them. So that's where it gets into a certain level. They need to be aware of the issue, and then they need to authorize the team that I'm working with that I can't say much about they need authorization to get these under control. And they are all former special forces guys who've separated from the military who are ready to go today, right now. But they're going to have support, both the funding and the legal support to do it. So my job has been to advise them and give them all the intelligence I have. And if you go and you look at this briefing document, this is you got a hard copy. I didn't know we got one. First hard copy. Okay. So this is the new briefing document for the White House and members of Congress. It's redacted with individual names and things that are sensitive. But I've never done this, but we made it available to the public this week. And you can order it at, I think it's drstephengreer.com or SiriusDisclosure.com. You can put the link up. And it has all that in there. It has a whole list of the 155 black sites. It has here's a map of them.
Those are the black sites.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to know where they are and what's there? It's in here.
Okay.
All right.
Any close to here?
Huh? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
I've been at a lot of them, not all of them, but I have witnesses, have whistleblowers who've been the way we put this together is that it's operational information, people who are tactically there. Imagine debriefing hundreds of people like Jake Barber. Mm-hmm. So I'll sign this to you.
Please do.
Huh? Should we?
Yeah, let's do it.
And now this other one, you want someone to hand that to him or no?
Could you grab it, Jay?
There you go. And then this one. This will come out in a hard copy in a few weeks. So this is really cool. So I collaborated with the crash retrieval expert Michael Schratt on this. And this is a whole collection of both the historic but also the newer crash retrievals, all illustrated. In each case, you'll see the object, and you'll see, let me find one that the camera, oh, here's Herrera's. So here's, for example, the craft that crashed, was abducting and transporting people. This is the Indonesia 2009 event. A very good representation. And the crate there had people in it. And then this is a summary on the other side of the page of 30 pages of testimony into a couple paragraphs, right? And on the following page is another illustration and then my commentary. So that's what this has just come out, and you can get this, and it covers the most important cases in history. Every single one of them, though, we took out anything that didn't have a named whistleblower or witness who was there or involved, whether it was police, military, corporate, right? So this is just available too. I'll sign it for you.
Thank you. Well, you claim that JFK was killed because he had fired Alan Dulles, who was going to release info on UFO secrets. And I guess you claim that Bobby Kennedy, there was a similar situation going on as well?
No, he wasn't. You kind of got it backwards. Jack Kennedy was killed because he wanted to get the CIA under control and him back in control of these covert UFO-related programs and associated programs, energy, propulsion, all of it. And Alan Dulles, who helped start the CIA with the billionaire Paul Mellon, whose grandson I've been working with, he very interestingly said, what he said was, they were going to put through a federal review process. And I know RFK Jr. said this on some years ago on, I think, Larry King, and that President Kennedy was going to basically dissolve or totally reform the CIA. And in the process of that, Jack Kennedy fired Alan Dulles, who had been instrumental in forming the CIA after the Roswell crash in 1947. And because of that, they said, oh, no, you're not. And they set up an assassination with patsies and all that. So we know that that's the case. And I have people in Europe as well as in the U.S. that have information on all of that. I think also Bobby Kennedy, Sr., RFK Jr.'s dad. Mm-hmm. And I have a letter. It's very interesting. It's in our archive. And it was dated May 1968, a month before they killed Bobby Kennedy. And it's Bobby Kennedy saying, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he says, I'm a card-carrying member of the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Association of America. They were called flying saucers back then. And it's signed by Bobby Kennedy. And how important this was. And he wanted to get to the bottom of it if he had become president. And a month later, he was dead. All right. So this issue is the third rail. I mean, a lot of people, this is one of the problems, is that when people realize what the gravity of the situation is, that this comes out, it's going to change almost every aspect of life on Earth, honestly. And there are people who don't want that to happen. There are religious people who don't. We can talk about that. There are technological people who don't. There's financial, oil, and other interests that don't. And so anyone who wants to move in that direction ends up runs into this buzzsaw, right? And it makes sense. And I tell this very funny story back in 1993, September 93, and I was at Lawrence Rockefeller at the Rockefeller Ranch out in the Tetons. And a lot of people don't know the Grand Tetons were owned by the Rockefellers. They owned everything. And they gave it to the U.S. government as a national park, but they kept out this really cool ranch in this remote area called the JY Ranch. And so I was invited to come out there, and late at night, I was out on one of the decks by, there was a bronze statue of a Native American on a horse. I think it was a Remington original. And Lawrence Rockefeller turns to me, he says, "You know, Dr. Greer, no aspect of life on Earth will be unchanged by this being disclosed." I said, "I know, Lawrence, that's why it's so secret." And they've taken such extraordinary means, including killing a former president. But, and he did help. I mean, he hosted the Clintons there. He was a conduit for information. He was not involved in setting up the briefing I did for the CIA director for President Clinton. In fact, he was shocked that was being set up when I was at the ranch, and he was like, "Oh my God, really?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where some of the original Roswell bodies and stuff were taken. When I leave your ranch, I'm going straight there to meet with the director of that part of that compartmented operation."
Well, you said in the spring of 2023, before the election, a team of people reached out to you who worked at black sites dealing with UAPs. Mm-hmm. And they were going to come forward with a bunch of evidence.
That's what we were talking about earlier, yes.
Yeah, but only a few seconds ended up being released.
That's right.
What was released exactly?
Well, you saw the Jake Barber, the egg.
Aha, so that was part of that same thing. Because Jake Barber was part of that, right?
Part of that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Aha, okay.
But there's a great deal more. What I said earlier, if you remember my comment on that, was that the plan was those folks were not going to be known publicly, and that it would just be an enormous amount of evidence and materials and video and stuff of these sort of operations that would get released. And we actually built a blockchain system to do it. We still have it. But then it was decided that would be too catastrophic, and that there weren't preparations adequate in either Congress or the White House to deal with it, and that to kind of delay that. Okay, so that's what I was referring to earlier. Yeah,
right. Well,
it's not just him. There's a whole group of folks.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned Michael Herrera before in this talk, and there was a 6-man unit that saw a hovering octagon UFO being loaded with weapons by unmarked U.S. forces who threatened him at gunpoint in Indonesia. Right. And you said he's the only guy I ever heard who actually talked about this and wasn't killed.
Correct. I've never heard of someone witnessing an operation like that who wasn't subsequently killed.
So everyone else who touched on this were taken out?
Not on that platoon. I think that he feels like the only reason they didn't flat out kill him is that there were a whole lot of his other expeditionary force around. They would have heard it, known they were missing, and would have caught that operation red-handed. So I think they did a risk-benefit analysis, decided, let's let these boys live, right? But then when they went back on the ship, their Marine ship hooked up later, I forget what port, it's in its testimony, and like some guys came on and threatened them, took their phones, took everything, and basically made them sign non-disclosure agreements. So the other five men who were with him are terrified to come forward. Herrera's a very courageous guy, honestly, but he didn't know what was in that crate until Jake Barber was at the conference that I did in 2023 at the National Press Club and the weekend before at the Marriott. And he saw the illustration we had done, and he immediately texted me, and we went to the green room where I was being held, and he said, "Those aren't drugs. Those are people in there." I went, "What?" So see, Michael Herrera didn't know. He just assumed it was drugs and guns being run by a clandestine operation because they make a lot of money that way. Drug trade, very lucrative, cash. No, these were people who were going to be used in P3 psionic training and experimentations. So, which was even worse. So, oh my God, what's worse than transporting drugs through a clandestine, covert, illegal operation is people, right?
And P3 stands for?
Psionic potential. Sorry, I'm blocking on the third. But it's basically telepathic capability.
You know, a lot of what you do has the word disclosure in it. Mm-hmm. And Steven Spielberg, his latest film actually changed the title to Disclosure.
I know. I should have copyrighted that.
Right. And I mean, Spielberg has a history of doing things with aliens, you know, in terms of topics in his movies, the most famous of which, well, there's a few. There is Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, that's the best one.
There's also E.T.
E.T., that was sweet.
Yeah. But Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there was a guy named Jacques Vallée.
That's the one who has that CIA document about abductions. Yeah.
And he was actually a consultant on that film.
Yes.
And you know Jacques?
Yes. I know, I'm not knowing him well. I know of him and met him. But and also J. Allen Hynek, who had been head of Project Blue Book, was a consultant on the film.
Okay.
Makes a cameo appearance, actually, towards the end there, as a bearded, white-haired scientist. Yeah. And he was the head of Project Blue Book for the Air Force that studied UFOs.
I mean, when you see that film, Close Encounters, is there anything in there that's actually based on what you found?
Oh,
or is it all fiction?
No. Well, obviously, it's Hollywood. But actually, most of what's portrayed, it's like a docudrama. Most of what was in there was portrayed based on actual events that had happened. So the way it was explained to me, I know it when it was shown at the Reagan White House. President Reagan stood up and said, there are only a couple people in this room who know how true to life that film is.
Okay,
yes,
wow.
I know three people, I think two of them are dead now, who were in the screening at the White House when they showed that. So, you know, it's a docudrama, great classic movie. Now, this new one, I have no idea what it'll be. I don't know Mr. Spielberg. I've met his son, Max, but I don't know him.
Well, Jacques Vallée was actually, there's a character based on him in that film.
Yes.
So not only was he a consultant, but they actually had a character.
Correct.
That was portraying to be him.
Right.
You know, and you know, of course, E.T. with the way E.T. looks. I mean, I don't know about the neck that goes up, but in general, these are very alien-looking kind of beings that you've seen in Hollywood and you've seen and so forth.
Right.
Was that based on anything, or was that just all fiction as well?
Well, I mean, I think some of them probably resemble somewhat like that, but it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to take, artistic license and do things that look a way that would grab people visually. But, I'm sure from what I understand, there are some ETs that would be similar to those. There are some that have a very triangular head, for example. We have one that came to one of our CE5 events that we have a photograph of. I was here, and a young medical student was here, and the ET was there. And
you sat next to an ET.
Yeah, have you seen the picture of it? Well,
No.
I'll text it to you.
So you were right there with a living ET?
Yeah, and there was an elderly man who had had his hearing lost since he was a teenager, and that night he had contact with this being, and it healed him of his hearing loss. No one's on drugs either. This is a cool picture.
Okay, is it in one of these books that you gave me?
I'm not sure if it is.
But you're gonna text me a picture.
Sure, if you want it.
You want to do it right now? So we don't forget.
I thought you had seen the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Of the fifth kind?
Yeah.
What's that?
You need to see. This is on the record. Everyone needs to see Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Okay.
I've seen them all.
You seen this?
Sure.
Oh yeah, it is amazing.
Who made it? Oh, this is yours.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. And what is a fifth kind encounter?
It's where we intend and invite them to come.
Aha.
Yeah.
Right, because a close encounter of the third kind is contact, right?
It's just when you see a biological even, an ET, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll send you one and then another one. This is at night, full darkness.
Okay.
And you'll like this, I think. And then I have another cool one where it was so cold we went inside and there were these two ETs that sat in our chairs that have these conical heads. It's less clear, but it's very cool. And then there was this cool, my favorite is this one. It's so abstract, but I call this the sort of a light beam, where it's an advanced species that's so advanced.
You know, we talked about the different types of alien species. There's like 69 that we potentially know of. Now, what's the difference between extraterrestrials versus light entities or interdimensional beings or plasmoids?
Great question, and it causes a lot of confusion. So on my YouTube channel, I've just started my own podcast, the Dr. Stephen Greer Show, and every week you can get an update on what's going on. Now, in one of the YouTube videos on that site, it has a whole deep dive into what I call ETs and the new cosmology, what kind of understanding of the cosmos is needed. Now, I think one of the biggest sources of confusion on this subject is the commingling and confusion between interstellar extraterrestrial biological entities and their craft, man-made lookalikes, and the third, people call extra-dimensional or interdimensional entities. And that's where you get folks who confuse something that's from another dimension with something from another star system. And the reason there's a lot of confusion on it, part of it's deliberate, is sort of where they want to shove paranormal onto UFO science. And it's risky because when you start dealing with extra-dimensional, interdimensional, are you talking about angels, demons, boogums, your great-grandmother who pops into this dimension like a poltergeist phenomenon? What are you talking about? So it's not helpful. And what I have seen happen, and I think it's deliberate, I think it's an attempt to obfuscate, confuse people. And obfuscation is a very good term. You know, they sort of mix it all together and confuse people looking into this, is that they will deliberately blend into ufology and ET. You know, I like being specific. So I don't like the term alien. Alien means all the above. Because whatever people think they don't know, it's alien, it's foreign, therefore it's alien. Now, I'm very specific. Okay, you're going to hear a little bit of the obsessive-compulsive doctor part come out here. But I speak of EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, who are from other star systems, right? Specific. That's when I say a UFO or ET. I make a very clear distinction between that and the man-made craft and critters that simulate ETs that are used in deceptive operations. And actually, the proper name for false flag at the Pentagon is a deceptive indication and warning, deceptive INW. So the other is this extra-dimensional or interdimensional phenomenon, kind of like Stranger Things. And that's real. And you can actually have physical phenomenon happen and things that you see that aren't extraterrestrial or man-made, but that are from another dimension. So 3 things. It's very simple. Real ET, man-made UFOs and fake ETs, and things from other dimensions that are weird. And one of the things I think is dangerous about that is that if you don't have enough knowledge to make a discernment of it, you put them all together. And there you're lost. Now you're lost forever. I think this is why Tucker Carlson, who's a conservative talk show host, he's been going around saying, well, the aliens are demons and they're demonic and they're... because he has been targeted with that same crowd of disinformation people with this combination of UFOs, and that's why I don't like the term NHI or non-human intelligence. Well, non-human is what? Dolphins. Some say they're more intelligent than humans. Wouldn't be hard to be. Cetaceans. Something from another dimension. Someone from another planet. So I think the lack of clarity on the language is actually deliberate, and I think it's done to confuse people and to confuse the phenomena, plural. So you have multiple phenomena going on, all being talked about as if it's the same thing. Not helpful at all. In fact, it's very harmful. And I love when I was at the Vatican years ago when Pope John Paul was Pope, his senior theologian, a great guy named Monsignor Balducci. And he said, neither angels nor demons need flying saucers. And it was so simple. And he was a demonologist. He was like the top demonologist at the Vatican, kind of creepy stuff. But he says, no, it is totally separate. But I think there is a deliberate attempt in certain quarters to conflate, confuse all this different phenomena. And I'm so glad you asked it because it's actually one of the very first things in the briefing document on a one-pager for leaders in our country and elsewhere is, this is what's being confused. So let's get some clarity here and get our lexicon, our word usage down accurately. Because otherwise, you're talking around each other. What are you talking about? Now, there's another subcategory of extradimensional or interdimensional, and that's human-induced extradimensional. So let's say you figured out some very sophisticated physics and electronics at certain frequencies. You can tap into another dimension and pull something out of that dimension into 3D. It's not extraterrestrial. It's not innately coming in. It's induced. That's what Skinwalker is. That's what the Bradshaw Ranch is. And I know how they do it. I know who's doing it, why they're doing it, right? But that's not the same as extraterrestrial. So, here's one of the problems we have. I said this earlier, a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing because what happens is when you don't have enough information, it's a very confusing picture. And in that confusion, you can be led to reach the wrong conclusions. And that's what's going on in the U.S. government and in the public and in the media.
Are you familiar with the term cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
Now, some people have accused people like you of cognitive dissonance in the terms of this. Like, we understand that within this solar system, there are no aliens.
There are no innate ones
that we know of. You go to any other planet, we've looked at Mars, Pluto, there's probably no life, Saturn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if there are aliens, they are from very far away. And even at light speed travel, they would die on their way here. So a concept that you use yourself is that they travel interdimensionally.
Yep.
Meaning that they don't travel the way that other physics objects in physics travel. Right. They travel through a different means. Could someone say, well, that's just cognitive dissonance? You're just creating since science doesn't support what you're, implying, you create a whole new type of science that can't necessarily be proven.
No, everything I'm saying has been proven, is proven. And by the way, I always say these are TDIS. It's transdimensional interstellar. So you're not going to go in a straight line. You can't go to the speed of light and stay linear. You have to drop out of linear space-time. It's like an Einstein-Rosen bridge, if you look that up. Or, instead of it being a straight line, here's, you're from here to here, look at it as a plane, a 1 point, 2 points. You take it like a piece of paper and fold it. So it's right here. So it's folding space-time. And that's the gravitational wave effect, and then you have that ability. Now, just because it's not being taught at MIT doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because these are classified technologies. But
this concept, is like A Wrinkle in Time, Narnia, right? Where they actually take time, and instead of a straight line, you kind of jumble the line together so you could jump.
But that's the whole point of the conscious quantum holographic universe. If you read the studies on quantum holography, every point in time, this is quantum entanglement. Every point in time and space is connected to each other. Now, that's been proven scientifically on the particle level. What we're talking about, civilizations advanced enough to do it on the macro level, a spacecraft full of people or whatever. And now, the fact that it doesn't comport with the textbooks on physics at MIT, so what? I mean, we're like one half the step out of the jungle scientifically as a species. I mean, a couple hundred years ago, we had what? Nothing. Horses and buggies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you're talking about a universe that's, 15 billion years old or something. So I think that this gets into this whole discussion of not everything that can be known is known in the conventional scientific world. In fact, I'd say almost everything we don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. It's this huge vastness. But certainly when you're dealing with civilization, and we can prove those are here because we have the bodies and the craft and all this stuff, well, how'd they get here? Well, they're not using the space shuttle, and they're not using SpaceX and a rocket. They're not. So then what are they using? That's the technology we're talking about. And it's been studied and developed. I think that this is a big, I always call this the big peace dividend down the road. Phase one of disclosing this will be the energy technologies that are just get rid of poverty and the damage we're doing to the biosphere and the oceans. Step two, once we have something resembling a peaceful civilization, what Michikaku calls a level one civilization, where we're not killing each other and destroying the biosphere. Once we become stable from that point of view, and we're no longer just killing each other over nonsense like we are now all over the world, then we can bring out the things that fly. So you'll be able to go from here to Paris in 3 or 4 minutes. And that'd be cool. Go there for lunch, come back. That's totally doable. It's already with technologies that exist. But you can't let that out now. Because if you let that out now, it's a missile delivery system for every terrorist in Mogadishu.
Well,
right?
I mean,
so
if you go from...
there has to be a process.
Yeah. I mean, if you can go from here to Paris in a couple of minutes, that means you could travel to Mars in, what, a couple hours maybe?
Well, really, when you ramp these things up, it'd be about 30 seconds. That's what the band, 30 seconds to Mars. I gave a talk a long time ago about getting to Mars in 30 seconds. So,
right.
So yeah, but
which means that you could actually reach other planets that have Earth-like environments.
We haven't been allowed
in a human lifetime.
Yes. Oh, the next day or a couple of days. The reason we're not allowed to do that at this point is that the extraterrestrial civilizations don't want us out there too far until we become civilized. Now people say, "Oh, we are civilized." I said, "We're not civilized. Come to my ER on a Saturday night if you think you're civilized." So what you're saying
is the aliens have human civilization on a short leash.
They're watching what we do to see if we actually make it through this transition.
Okay.
Now, there are civilizations that have never made it through this transition and make themselves extinct because of their foolishness. And
we might be one of them.
We may be. Well, this is to be determined,
my friend.
We're
well on our way to that.
Yeah, we are. I mean, it's like when Colonel Bearden said, "Now, don't get me wrong." He's from Louisiana, highest IQ, one of the highest IQ guys I ever met. He said, "Now, don't get me wrong. The fools may blow it yet." It's a great interview with Colonel Bearden. It's in our archive. Brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant. Physics, and he had been a lieutenant colonel Army, knew about all the new energy and free energy stuff. It was just a genius. But I think that is the big question. So it is sort of an existential question and crisis. The only way, here's sort of the bottom line on that, the only way we can go forward and have a society here is that we become peaceful. And we can't go out into space and be a bunch of war-mongering fools either. So that's why we need a space treaty. We need a treaty that says we're not going to put weapons out in space. We're not going to target these ET assets. We're going to stand those systems down. We're going to do an official CE5 ambassador outreach to these civilizations. So instead of shooting them out of the skies and hijacking them and shooting them, we're going to create a global rapprochement and peaceful approach to them, which is what should have happened in the 50s. Eisenhower wanted that to happen. He got subverted. This is why no president has control over those covert programs since Eisenhower, since about 56, 57, 58.
Well, Dr. Stephen Greer, you actually brought someone with you, Tony Ferreira, who is a former commercial pilot who actually worked for a major airline for 25 years. And you've actually had experience with UFOs.
Yes, I have.
Well, tell me what you've seen.
Well, I've seen many while flying, but probably some of the more interesting ones, I'll say, would be an orb appearing in front of me that not too far, that would seem that it would be another airplane, let's say, about the same altitude, bright, quite large, larger than it would be an airplane that would have its landing lights on. Because up at altitude, with the landing lights on, it could appear like an UFO, but this would be larger than that, and I'd be observing it. This particular one, looked at the co-pilot, and he's seen the same thing. In this particular case, I was about to ask Air Traffic Control, LA Center at the time, if there was a plane or something in front of us, and then it didn't materialize right in front of our eyes, changed colors like in the blink of an eye, and then disappeared. That was one. Another one, we see again, actually we're observing the satellite up in the sky, and then right in that same direction, a little bit lower and much closer, because I know what satellites look like, right? And we're commenting, me and the co-pilot, on the satellite that we're observing. This light appears in front of us, and I've seen many, like I said, over the years, because I'm looking. People have asked me, Tony, why is it that you see so many? I said, well, for one, you got to be looking, and I'm constantly looking, because I've had an interest in this most of my life. So anyways, this light, just another light appeared right in front of us, in the same direction that the satellite was at, but much closer and near. And I said to my co-pilot, this was the first time we'd seen something like that. I said, keep your eye on it. And I'd say maybe 3 seconds goes by, and then it dimmed and then shot to the left.
Right.
Just like in a blink of an eye.
Right.
Well, do commercial planes, do they have some sort of video recording equipment that happens, or no, that's not a thing?
No.
So you'd have to pull out your cell phone and actually record it.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about how you were a pilot for 25 years. I mean, yeah, 20 years ago, phones didn't really have cameras. I get it. This, in the last 5 to 10 years, video cameras improved on iPhones and so forth. So
Correct.
Did you ever have a good quality cell phone with you where you actually pulled out your phone and recorded it?
During the day. At night, no. But because I've shared my stories with colleagues, friends that are pilots, and also mentioned to them, have the presence of mind to pull your phone and record it. I do have pictures on my phone that friends have taken at night of lights. And recently, there's been a lot of reports of it. I mean, we're hearing it all over from different sources of pilots actually recording these. But at night, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference from the picture that I took from the stars out there. And sometimes the flash on the will be on the phone. It just lights up the cockpit. Excuse me, but I have a very clear one of an orb on my way over the Pacific from the mainland to Hawaii that I recorded.
I mean, based on your relationship with Stephen Greer and all the information that he shared over the years, do you think these are extraterrestrial machines, or are they man-made, human-made machines that are made to look like something extraterrestrial?
That's a very good question. Both. And I can tell you, this might be interesting, yes, but it plays into the C5, work that we've been doing. There have been times that I'll be in the cockpit, looking at the sky at night, usually, and usually on cross country, transcon flights where we're flying for hours on end, and it gets boring after a while. We converse, we chat, we talk, in the cockpit amongst ourselves, visit, and then we run out of stuff to do. So I tend to dim down the lights in the cockpit, and I look for shooting stars or skies out there, and I'll often get into, or did, retired now, so would get into a meditative state.
While flying a plane.
Yeah.
You don't see anything wrong with that.
I'm in a meditative state right now.
But there's also not 500 people depending on you being completely conscious during this time. You can fall asleep if you want, and no one will be hurt.
The meditative state that I'm talking about is one of heightened consciousness, awareness.
It's the opposite of what you're talking about.
It's the opposite of what I'm talking about. Okay,
100%.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well,
By the way, your best Top Gun pilots
Yeah.
have that faculty.
Okay, I see what you're just a hyper focus.
Yeah.
Have you heard the term of being in the zone?
Yes, that's what you're talking about.
Similar.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, I looked it up. Commercial airplanes are equipped with AWR, airborne weather radar,
Correct.
right? Now, would this type of radar detect other ships close by?
Not the radar. We have TCAS, which stands for Traffic Collision Avoidance Systems.
Aha, right.
That detects other aircrafts, but not ET or man-made.
So you're saying that this radar you had didn't detect any of these ships?
No. For one, they're beyond the range of the coverage of.
Oh, so they're far off.
I mean, when I say far off, the traffic collision avoidance system typically doesn't go beyond like 20, 30, 40, 50 miles,
Miles?
Yeah.
So you're saying they're farther than 50 miles?
Well, some of them come to,
Did you even
I should
see
say
something that far?
the radar, the radar could go beyond that. It
All right,
wouldn't-
but
it
you're
wouldn't-
describing these ships as being relatively close.
Oh, yeah. So, well, some are I would estimate to be in inner orbit. Some of them could be in outer orbit, but some, yes, close. The one that I recorded during the day, I would estimate that it was maybe just a couple of thousand feet above us. But it's really hard to know the distance or the size because you don't have a reference point. If there are clouds that, are nearby that we know what their altitude is and it's on this side of the cloud, then we could estimate. But other than that, it's just like really hard to know. You're just guessing at that point.
Well, Dr. Stephen Greer, it's our third time. Definitely appreciate it, and I appreciate you bringing Tony Ferreira with you.
Well, he's out here helping. He's a great guy. Been with our team for years. And
another person.
we have lots and lots of pilots on our team who are commercial. Yeah. We have American Airlines captain who flies Airbus 321s on our team. We have a lot. And when I go through airports, I get stopped a lot by pilots, and they'll pull me aside, tell me there's account of what happened. There's actually thousands of reported cases.
Yeah.
They don't make their way into the media or into any government reporting system. And a lot of times, when it's a very close encounter, the pilots don't know what to do about how to report it, and they're told don't report it, or they'll report it and it just never makes it up the chain of command.
Tony, did you ever try to report any of your sightings?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Not correct. Because for one, as a representative of the airline, it's not a subject that you want to be talking about publicly because it kind of puts you in a position that might not look good for the airline.
So what you're saying is they might think you're crazy and they fire you?
That would be the worst case scenario. They wouldn't. No, I wouldn't say that they would fire me, but it's not something that you would want to really be bringing up.
Could you hand me the book, not the hardcover, the other one? All right, this is a very famous airliner, 747 Heavy, Japan Airlines, flying the polar route from Paris to Tokyo. One of the best, most documented cases in history.
Yes.
This case happened in the 80s, and it was on radar, It was on board.
Yes.
It was on ground military radar. It was on ground FAA radar. And the object was the size of an aircraft carrier. That in one sweep of the radar could go from one direction to 180 degrees over, virtually teleported. Now, this case, that pilot, because it got reported, was put on desk duty by Japan Airlines until a friend of mine, Dr. Richard Haynes, who was with NASA, Ames Research Center, went over to Japan and said, no, this is real. And the guy, there's nothing wrong with him. But they actually penalized that pilot for reporting this. Now, interestingly, if you go into our briefing materials that we've given you, the briefing document anyone can get now, or our archive, you'll see that one of our witnesses is John Callahan, who was the head of investigations and accidents for the FAA. He gave me, and I possess, the original FAA radar and all the digital data of this event. Not a copy. The CIA thought they confiscated the copy. He kept it when he retired, gave it to us, the Disclosure Project. So when I run into people who go, where's the evidence? I said, well, it's not our fault you don't read. It's not our fault you haven't studied the subject matter. So I'm increasingly, look, I'll be 70 in June. I'm sort of done with people who say, there's nothing there. I say, why? Because you're too dumb and lazy to study it? Sorry. But I mean, I'm a little burned out. You can take this part out. But we have all this, right? Who's looking at it? So even when you put it on a silver platter and give it to members of Congress, they don't have time to look at it. And their staffers are so busy running around doing nonsense. So this is where I think a specialized team, special forces, former special forces, under executive order, they'll know where to go. And they will get to the people and to the legal government of the United States all of this under control. We can do it. We know how to do it, where to do it. Now, we'll see what the president does. We'll see what Congress does.
That's how we're going to end it.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to end it.
Yeah.
Let's see what the president does. Dr. Stephen Greer, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Time.
Yeah, good seeing you.
Looking forward to seeing you next time.
Great seeing you in person, yeah.
And thank you, Tony, for coming and sharing your story.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Until next time. Thank you.